I have on right now. So
That I believe.
yeah.
That I believe. Hey,
Is that
you
too
know
much
that?
information?
No, I'll thank
I'll
you in
buy
advance now for staying seated. You
it.
know, Johnny, you know these guys better than I do. Say hello.
Hello, hello, man. It's probably been what, 40 years, Gar, since you saw Plesac, huh?
Yeah, it's
Well,
been
it
forever.
has been, and well, he hasn't changed a lick. I'm
Yeah.
telling
No.
you. Um, you know, I tell you, he's changing my opinion of left-handers. We used to think they were a little bit goofy, but he's actually pretty damn good on TV, and he sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
You know what? He's outstanding on TV. I tell him that all the time. I think he thinks I'm just bullshitting, but I think he does a great job.
Well, you know, I think
He
it's
speaks the
kind
truth.
of, I think it's kind of rare for the number of ball players that come through the major league system, and then they end up having a great second career. And Danny's done a great job with it. So
Yeah, and Rock's got a good one
kudos.
going right now. Rock's doing
Yes, he does.
Who is that, Jim?
Rock, Schroeder.
Bill Schroeder.
Oh, Bill. Well, I haven't seen Bill Schroeder in years either. He's doing Milwaukee
Yeah, he's
local
doing
games.
really well. One guy you
Yeah.
didn't know, Phil, was Brian Anderson. That guy's a pro. You know him, Sack, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's good.
Then he'll do playoffs for NBA. I met him when he first came in, and some of these guys really haven't. He played minor leagues as a catcher. But you're right. You get these guys like Dan. Dan, does that come from your background? Did you have like
No, no, it was I didn't have a difficult time with the media, talking before or after, so that kind of made it easy. But you have to do it over a while to like start to get good at it. Like, you're afraid to mess a name up or you lose a train of thought, and then you just kind of like learn to deal with it. And you just now I mean they just point and shoot me, and I just go do what I do.
mm-hmm. It's a kind of an autopilot thing. I mean,
Yeah.
to get used to. Like, I don't like doing this. You know, I've been in radio and I've been on print. This is not natural to me. But after a few weeks, I'm like, F it. It's getting easy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't like to see my face is the main thing. But
Right.
now I'm like, you know what? This is fun. And Johnny and I've done a boatload of these together, and I love this new technology. I mean, it's great. Johnny.
Yeah, no, it is. It's outstanding. I hope Trev hops on here because I don't know, Gar, have you and Trev ever really talked?
Uh, no, we really haven't. Over the years, just to say hello in passing. But when I came into Milwaukee, he was already gone, so
Yeah.
I never really talked with him. And then our paths didn't cross. I forgot who he got a job with somebody there after that for a
Cubs.
while, and to just say hello.
Cubs.
Yeah, Cubs.
Cubs. Yeah, I just say hello to him. But I really never did know him. Always had, people spoke extremely highly of him. Sometimes when managers get fired, people come out of the woodwork uh,
Bash him.
to bash him a little bit. But I never heard that about Trump. Not from
No.
anybody in Milwaukee. Everybody,
He was a good
everybody
guy.
seemed to like him.
Yeah.
Well, same with you, Gar. Nobody has anything but positive things to say about you. Greg Hoffman asked me if he could get in touch with you. Did he do that, Greg
Oh
Hoffman?
yeah, certainly he can. Yeah, not a
Yeah,
problem.
he's a good guy, but no, I've never heard of anything
Yeah.
but you being approachable and fun to talk to. And thank you always, even back then. Yeah, it is kind of strange to me how people don't run into each other a little more often. Like people, like you said, Treb, the community, especially as guys get older, they seem to like touching base again. Like, I don't know what happened to Duffy Dyer. I think maybe his wife figured he couldn't handle the technology here. So we were beyond.
Well, probably with Duffy, we couldn't get his whole head in the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd have to get that wide angle shot, Johnny.
I'm just saying.
Have him and
I'm
both
not
you on
throwing
the
no
same
shade,
show.
but
You got
I'm
no
just saying.
chance, right?
Hey, Gar, I've got a question that I never asked you. When Sal reached out to you and asked you, would you be interested in managing the Brewers? Was there one or two other people that were under consideration?
Actually, as I recall back, I think he did interview anybody, but when he called me, I actually told Sal that I said, Sal, I'm not sure if I'm ready yet to manage, but there's a guy down here in Houston named Matt Galani
Oh
who
yeah.
is
Oh,
ready
wow.
and outstanding, and he would make a wonderful manager. And I think you ought to interview him. Well, he said, why don't you just come up and talk to us? So I went up and I talked to him, and the interview went really well. And I think the interview went so well because I was in my mind, I was thinking, I'm
Nothing to
not
lose.
ready. So I really don't think I can do the job just now. And so when it was over, I asked him a bunch of questions, and I reiterate, I said, Sal, I really think you ought to talk to Matt. And so I go home, and a couple of days later, he calls me and he says, "We'd like to offer you the job." And I said, "Sal, I'm not sure. Have you talked to Matt Galante yet?" And so he says, "No." And so we hang up. 2 days later, he calls me and offers me more money. I wasn't doing this to get a better deal. I mean, I
Sure.
literally thought Matt Galante would make a better manager at that time than I would.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunately for me, they didn't do it because number one, going to Milwaukee was a great move for me. Number two, working with Sal was a great pleasure, and I think had it been somebody else, they might not have been forgiving at some of my mistakes, and so
Yeah.
Sal was really good, and I actually enjoyed Bud Selig. I mean, Bud was
Yeah.
the kind of
So did
guy that
I.
interfered. Once or twice a year, he'd come down, he'd sit in the manager's chair and just want to talk. He never really said. The only time we ever kind of had any, and I wouldn't call them ill words. There might have been a little bit disagreement was during the strike when they wanted to have replacement players.
Yeah.
Bud's idea is that if everybody's is the same on the field, competitive wise, then baseball's still good. And I said, no, people know what major league players are all about,
There's
and
a level.
and so we disagree. Yeah, we disagreed on that, but a gentleman's disagreement on it, and I hated to have to go through that. And I don't think Bud enjoyed going through that either. Both sides were dug in, and both sides had good reasons to do what they were doing. So I don't think either side was wrong. I disagreed, with the replacement players and all that, but and unfortunately, we had to go through with it. So
Yeah.
um, and some of them were characters. Some of the replacement players that
I
we had were
remember.
characters. But if anything, I felt like when it happened, I actually think the philosophy backfired on the owners because it showed that if anybody out there deserved to be in the big leagues or on a big league team somewhere in the minor leagues even, they were already there. There were no
Yeah.
other guys
Mhm.
that you brought in as replacement guys. Now there were a couple of them that hung on and got to play a little bit, but I didn't see anybody that I said, "Oh wow, he deserves to be on the team."
Sure.
They had flaws that were glaring, and they would have shown up if against a better
Exposed them
competition.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not to berate anybody. It's just when you're looking at guys on talent and the skill level, and can they produce at a triple A or a major league level, they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
weren't going to compete with the guys that were in the big leagues.
Yeah. True.
That's
True.
a big shadow to come up to. Hey, Gar, when you're in an interview like that, honestly, I've been in my share of interviews, but not for a management job. What takes place? What is Sal trying to ask you in a situation like that? What does he want to know?
Well, the first thing he wanted to know, this was interesting, is as I recall, which surprised me a little bit, is he was wanting to know how committed would I be to a conditioning program and stretching.
Hmm.
Now, through no fault of anybody's, the reason I got the job in Milwaukee, I always thought was because the previous year, Treblehorn lost, I think, all 5 starters to injuries.
At one time
Or
or
certainly 4 out of 5. He might have lost all 5.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody can survive that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
nobody's fault. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what program you're on. I mean, you can do absolutely nothing and and you won't lose 5 starters or 4 starters
Mm-hmm.
on your big league team. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that is rotten luck any other way
Mm-hmm.
you say it. And so that had been what happened. There'd been these um, rash of injuries to pitchers. And
Mm-hmm.
so Sal, when he came in, Sal was coming in as the new GM too. I think Bud had set with Sal, and they all thought, well, we're going to have to go through stretching programs, and we're going to have to have a more emphasis on physical conditioning, and we did. So that was a big question. He asked me about discipline. You know, how would you discipline a player if such situation happened? And so I was a little from the old school in that because I believed in we didn't have anybody on the Milwaukee team that was a disciplinary problem, that you couldn't deal with. I mean, Bosman and I had a shouting match one time. Chris Bosman,
Oh, Bazio.
Oh yeah.
Chris
Yeah.
Bosio and I had a shouting match because in a Yankee game we didn't want to walk a guy, and Bosio ends up hitting him, and when he hits him, the reason I didn't want to walk him because we don't get the next guy up, we got to face the Yankee first baseman, what do they call him, Donnie Baseball, Donnie Mattingly,
Yeah.
who killed us, and killed Bosio. And so, as it turns out, Bosio didn't get the next hitter, and here comes Donnie Baseball and rifles a triple off of the wall. And I go to the mound, and when I get to the mound, he turns around to me and says, "What in the F are you doing out here?" And that ticked me off. And so we got in a shouting match. I don't know. I told ended up taking him out of the game and said, "Go in the clubhouse and wait till the game's over, and we'll get in there." So we got in a really bad shouting match. And after, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes of shouting at each other, both of us were shouting at each other. I mean, face to face, finally, I said, Boz, I'm tired. I don't know about you, but I'm out of gas here just yelling at each other. So we sat down and we started talking, and I never had another problem with Bosio. And as a matter of fact, he whipped off something like 10 straight starts where he just was out of sight.
Yeah.
So
he had good stuff.
So that was one of the things that Sal was interested in. How do you handle certain situations with the media and stuff like that? And how do you interact? How would you interact with coaching staff? So all those were pertinent questions for a guy, particularly like me, who had never managed. They didn't have a track record on being able to know what I would do. So as it turned out, I think some of it by the seat of my pants, but some of it turned out pretty good. I think
Yeah.
I think it worked out pretty good.
Well, it sure helped the first year that you managed. We had an unbelievable successful season that year.
We did things a little differently. For instance, the American League had gotten lackadaisical about the running game. And
Yeah,
when
we
we
ran
looked
a
at
lot.
our team, we didn't have power on our team, but we had some guys that could put the ball in play. And we had some guys that could run.
Yeah.
And like Daryl Hamilton, he could put the ball in play. Daryl was a good hitter and he could run. And then we had Pat Listash that joined the ball club, the first week of the season. And
Rookie of the
he
year.
could run. And so we just kind of took advantage of that, and it created a stir. As a matter of fact, we went into Detroit, and we had a 5 or 6 run lead in like the 6th inning, and I still had the green light on, and we stole second and third base. And the next day, the manager of Detroit, drawing a Silver Fox, what's his name?
Sparky
Sparky.
Anderson.
Sparky Anderson came out in the paper and said, said Milwaukee's running game borders on the ridiculous. And so in those days, Sparky had 5 guys, I think, on that, 4 at least, but maybe 5 that hit 20 home runs. And so the next day, I went up to Sparky on the batting cage and I said, he was the granddad of managers. And here I am, just a rookie coming in. I said, Sparky, I in no way intend to embarrass you in the game. That's not my intention, and God forbid, you're the daddy of all. But I got to tell you something. When your guy comes to the plate in the 8th inning and you got a 6-run lead, you don't tell him not to hit a home run. And you've got a bunch of guys when they walk to the plate, they're in scoring position. And in some cases, we have to steal second and third just to get in scoring position. So I'm not going to call off the dogs because I can't sleep at night if I let a game get away from me. If I've got a 4-run lead going into the 7th inning and we lose the game. So, and Sparky says, well, you do what you got to do. And I said, I'll do that, Sparky, and you do what you got to do. And what we were both meaning was, he was going to hit one of my players and I was going to hit one of his players if he took exception to my running game. And so as it turns out, I noticed in the paper about 3 weeks later, Sparky lost the game in the 9th inning with a 5-run lead. Now, the reason that's important is because the old rule was if you stopped your aggressive managing, if a grand slam couldn't beat you. So he lost the game with a 5-run lead, and I thought, well, perhaps there's a little poetic justice in there.
Well, if they come back and you didn't do that, you'd be crucified anyway. I mean, so it's a no-win scenario. I mean, you have to go for it.
We had to play a different game, and Danny and some of the other guys, Bosio and Wegman, guys pitched good. Right? Some of our guys that came back and surprised people, and they pitched well. So a lot of people did their jobs and did them well. And so we got lucky. Treblehorn got unlucky.
Hey, Sack, you have a monumental task of knowing the leagues, both leagues. How do you prep? Dealing with each game and dealing with the players in their current statuses. Talk to me about your prepping for a show.
Well, tonight I'm on from 6 to 7 and 7 to 8. And we're previewing the Phillies in the first hour and I think the Rangers in the second hour. We've got a great research team that when we have a meeting, I'll have our production meeting at 3:00, and they'll kind of go by they do the blocks, 15 minutes. A block is from 6 to 6:15. B block 6:15 to 6:30, and then the blocks are 10 minutes the last half hour. And they basically tell you, okay, this is the A block. We're going to welcome in, show highlights of spring training games, voice over those. And then we're going to throw it out, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Phillies. What do you want to talk about? I'll say, hey, the rotation, probably the best in the National League. Lineup is great. Schwarber, Bryce Harper, Bohm, it just goes on. And then they'll say, what are your concerns? And I'll say, what it's been the last 3 years, bullpen. Last year, game 1, they had the Mets, Zach Wheeler pitched great. They went to their bullpen, 2 guys that made the All-Star team. They fell apart. And then that ghost of the Phillies bullpen thing bit them all over again. And then we'll just talk about, they signed Jordan Romano. The problem with the job that I have now, once it starts now, like every night before I go to bed, I go on my iPad and I try to read as much as I can read. Like if there's something that I missed, go to each team's website, like who's a surprise guy, because you never know what you might be asked by a host. Like you have to be prepared to answer anything. Like if, yesterday we were talking about the Tigers, and luckily I remember that young kid, Jackson Jobe, that only had been in AA. They called him up in September. And I remember I just kind of read a couple articles. And so when Brian asked me, hey, where do you think Jackson Jobe will be? You just kind of know. I try to do a show thinking, okay, if a guy's at home watching, he wants to know about this team. It's not just the obvious. It's like, hey, tell me something about that team that like I don't know, that like, or the cool part about my job is when we'll do a live look in and we'll say, hey, we're here. I remember Mitch Keller, guy from the Pirates, made his first big league start like 4 years ago. And we were on the set, and they were asking me, "Hey, what do you think's going through his mind?" And it just you get flashbacks to when you played. Like you're running in, your heart's beating, the catcher looks so small, you don't want to bounce a warm up, like all those things that the normal person doesn't think. Like you're nervous as hell. You've been a minor league guy your whole life. Like my first day in big league camp in '86. I mean, that was an intimidating clubhouse to walk into. Like, first of all, you've never played with them, and in your minor leagues at those times, they didn't have camps where they were together like they are now. Every team now, their big league and their minor league facility is in the same place, so they always have guys coming in and out. Where those days, when I was with the Brewers, we were way out in Glendale on, God, I can't remember. That road.
Oh yeah, at 83rd and Bell.
Oh, Bell Road. And so nobody knew what big league camp was. So then I walk in the first day, and I'm like, I see Mauder, Yount, Cooper, Ogilvy, Gantner, Simmons, and I'm just like, holy shit, man! Like this is on. Like, and you don't know how to take all that, right? And so, yeah, it's just different now. It just everything is different. Like, and they make younger players now feel more comfortable when they come in. Like, there's not like give them shit and like, hey, shut up and keep your mouth shut. They call a guy up now. These guys now, that you go to a big league camp. Johnny and I were playing golf last week, and the biggest thing that I just chuckle, like when I would go to spring training camp and get to the airport in Phoenix, Jimmy Bank would have, hey, we have an account with Hertz and go rent a car. And like there were 40 cars in the players' parking lot. It was either a red, a white, or a blue Honda Civic. Now you go there, and a guy in AA that signed for $2 million got a Lamborghini, and he's trying to make sure he can get his car shipped to Jacksonville in AAA. If I would have done that to Jimmy Banks, said, hey, I don't know if I'm going to make the team, but can you ship my car to El Paso? He'd have beat the shit out of me. It's just different. It's just different.
God.
Yeah.
Gar, what was it like when you showed up at training camp? Like M&Ms and a
cup of soup.
Very similar. Very similar. Did you say John or Phil?
You.
No, Phil.
Phil.
Me? Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, very similar to what Danny's experience was, because the minor league teams were separate from the big league teams. And I had never been in a big league camp until the year that I had looked like I was going to make the team. And so it's the same thing. It's Reggie Jackson, it's Sal Bando, Bert Campaneris, Joe Rudy, Gene Tennis, and you walk Raleigh Fingers, Catfish Hunter. All these guys, were superstars. They'd already won several World Series, and so I'm actually, when I walk in, I'm starstruck. Because the only big league game I had ever seen in my life was when I was about 12 years old, and we went from Tennessee down to Atlanta, and actually Hank Aaron hit 2 home runs that night. It was Atlanta against Pittsburgh, and Roberto Clemente hit 2 home runs that night. And the first one, I had gone up to go get a hot dog and missed it. And so I got to see the second one. So that was the only big league game I had ever seen, other than to watch something on TV, which was the old Saturday afternoon game with the
Game of the
Falstaff
week.
guy.
Yeah.
And so I was starstruck. And my wife likes to remind me that about 4 weeks into spring training, I came in and she said, "How's it going?" And I said, "I think I can play with these guys." I mean, it literally took that long. I wasn't sure. I just didn't know. I mean, because when you think of Reggie Jackson, Sal Bando, and Tennis, and all these guys you'd seen in the World Series, they were special. So it took a little while to get comfortable. And the Oakland A's were a vicious ball club. Raleigh Fingers, as Johnny and Dan know, was one of the funniest guys on the planet, but he absolutely could just cut you to pieces when you get on a bus at night after a game. And God forbid you'd made a stupid base running mistake, or you struck out with somebody on third, because you got called out on every little thing that happened when you got on a bus. We were in Boston one time, and we were going from the Boston hotel to the Boston ballpark, which is literally a mile.
Yeah.
But the bus driver took a roundabout trip and maybe went 5 miles to get to the bus. Well, Raleigh Fingers is on his ass the whole time. Hey, Bussy, there's a three-legged dog peeing on the back wheel here. Can you get it going a little faster? And when we walk, everybody goes off the bus. Of course, I'm in the last seat, and I hear the bus driver say, "Now I know what the A stands for on our hat, assholes." So they were brutal, and nobody was nobody escaped it. Reggie Jackson, Raleigh Fingers would get all over Reggie Jackson, and Bando would get all over somebody else. It was something that happened every day in the clubhouse and every day on the bus. So as a rookie, you tried to hide in a corner somewhere so nobody could see you. But it also had a way of making you grow up real fast. So you had to develop a thick skin.
Yeah.
And stay focused, because God forbid you didn't want to make a mistake.
Hey, Gar, in relation to that, if you didn't have the ability to go after each other, I think you'd have a lack of chemistry. I got to believe any winning team had that kind of ability to shoot the shit with each other and just cause each other, grief in a great way. But don't you know what I mean? Chemistry is forged out of something like that.
I think so. It's changed a lot in the regard that younger ball players don't get the hazing that they used to get, but the older players, like when I managed Milwaukee, when I managed Milwaukee, of course, you had Robin Yount and Paul Molitor and Jimmy Gantner. Nobody was going to question those guys if they say, "Okay, we're going to do this." Nobody questioned it. You go do it. And when I managed Houston, I had Jeff Bagwell and Craig Biggio, and nobody was going to question what anybody did. Let me go back to one little incident we had in Milwaukee. We had David. What was the catcher's name? The left-handed
Nielsen.
from Australia.
David Nielsen.
Yep.
David Nielsen was a rookie, and David was an Australian, a wonderful kid and very talented. But he felt like baseball was overhyped in America, and that you should only play baseball 3 days a week. That playing 6-7 days a week was just too much. It's too hard on the body and all this, and that you ought to just take life a little easier. And that's the way David Nielsen was. And so sometimes David would not run hard to first base.
Right.
And so I called him in and I said, "David, you may be able to do that in Australia, but here we want you to run hard to first base. We want to put an effort on. There's, dads pay good money to come to the ballpark. They bring their kids. The little league teams are out there and they're watching everybody. And one of the things that you have control over, if the only thing you have control over, is the effort you put in, especially when you leave home plate and you're running to first."
Yep.
And so I said, "You need to put a little more effort in." And so as God would have it that night, Robin Yount comes up and taps a ball to the pitcher. He's out by 50 feet, but he sprints across first base. And here he is, 40 years old, and I look down at Dave Nielsen on the bench, and he's looking at me with a shit-eating grin on his face, and he got the point. And when you have leadership like that, guys like that, it makes it a lot easier. You just have to point them in the right direction, and the leadership on the ball club takes over from there.
Hey, Sack, I know how tough your job is in front of all these people, but you look at somebody like Brady, who's coming out of the NFL, and now they paid him $1 billion to be a broadcaster. That doesn't mean just because the experience doesn't mean he's going to be a good color guy, in my estimation. I listened to him, granted it's his first year. I wasn't like, wow. I think Chris Collinsworth was a lot more insightful. What is your take on being a great player, and how does it translate to being a great broadcaster?
Well, the toughest part about broadcasting, it's like playing. If you think you're not overstriding when you're pitching or you're swinging hard or something, you probably are. And we have a lot of guys when the postseason comes that are fresh off the field, team that got eliminated, and we're at a meeting at 4:30 for a 6 o'clock pregame show. And man, they're just tearing this meeting. We're like, wow, great insight. All of a sudden the red light comes on and it's like they just vapor lock, man. They clam up. I remember Todd Jones came on when the Tigers got eliminated, and they wanted to have him as a guest analyst, and he's in the meeting telling stories about the Tigers and the season, telling us about players, and we were great. I remember it was me, him, Harold Reynolds, and Greg Amsinger. We got on the set, man, and he's sitting next to me. I can see beads of sweat on his nose coming down his ears, and I'm like, God, man, man, I mean, he just clammed up. And then, when it's a weird thing because you're taken out of your element. Yeah. Like when this all of a sudden, hey, you got all kinds of traffic in your ear. You're wearing an IFB, and you can hear the control room saying, hey, 30, like we're in a conversation like we're talking right now, and somebody's in my ear. Hey, you got to pick it up. We got 20 seconds to break. And so when you first start doing that, it's hard to, like, you're hearing that guy, then you lose the train of thought what you were talking about. And it's like when the coolest thing I've done, I was very lucky last year. I did like 8 games with Bob Costas. Yeah. And the first game I did with Bob Costas was about 10 years ago, a Cubs Cardinal game at Wrigley. And that visitors announcers booth at Wrigley is very small. Yeah. And Bob brings a stats guy with him, Elliot Kalb, and he's his guy during the game. And it's a really cool when you see the inside part of this thing, like you're wondering, like, how does he know what's going on? Well, this Elliot will take little pieces of paper and he'll write a note like, 1912, the last Dodger to hit for the cycle or whatever. And so Bob, it's one thing to get that info and know how to weave it in a conversation instead of like being mid-thought, say, hey, well, here's a slider. Hey, at 1905. And they're like, but Bob has a knack of knowing like when to take that nugget that they feed you. Like right. I'll be doing a game and he'll send me notes, last 16 hitters, let's just say I'm doing the Phillies game. Wheeler, last 16 pitches have been first pitch strikes to 15 to 16. Well, I have to wait till the next hitter comes up. And if it's strike one and there's a break, you go like, man, he's been 16 for 17 first pitch strikes. Like, so you get that info, but you got to know how to weave that info in. And one thing, getting back to Gar, I think the difference between the guys now and when we played, Phil, too, the technology has been good, but it's been an evil. When you walked into a clubhouse in spring training, everybody would get the paper in Arizona. If you were in Florida, look at the box scores for the Grapefruit League, and you would like, oh, man, I'm glad I'm not pitching in Arizona. The wind must have been blowing out. Well, now the technology has it's like regular life. You walk into a clubhouse now before a game, and there's nobody in the clubhouse because they're all afraid of the media because of the access that everyone has and with the phones. And so most guys, if they are sitting at their locker, they're sitting facing the locker with their back to you, and they're on the phone. They're on Instagram. They're on Twitter. They're, FaceTiming. And so the normal interaction that you had with players when you didn't have a phone. I mean, I remember when the phones first came out, we had a rule in Milwaukee, hey, turn the phones off. Once batting practice starts, the phones are off. And now if you would tell, like, I leave the house in 5 minutes, I forget my phone to the golf course. I'm like, shit, I got to turn around and go home. Like, there's nothing that pressing, but we've become an age where you want things so fast. And that's the one thing I think that makes it harder for players now. There's instant feedback, right? A guy has a crappy start. He gets back to his locker. He looks at the phone, and there's 1,500 people that are saying he stinks, he sucks, they should send him down. Right. You've got people on Instagram commenting like, this guy's not a prospect, he sucks, where you none of that happened. And, like, it's to the point now where, like, we could go out after a game, John, in Boston, and we could go have an adult beverage and sit and joke around. Guys are scared now because they go to a place and somebody's taking a selfie and posting it on his Instagram, and you don't know who that guy is. He could be a drug dealer, whatever it is, and all of a sudden your name is in a picture, and like we all do. Guys say, hey, can I take a picture? You put your arm around the guy, you smile, you give him a thumbs up. All of a sudden, that guy posts that on his Instagram, and you find out he's doing, he just get out 15 for life for robbery. And you're like, damn, I'm taking around with a rough crowd, man.
Zach, that's why I never went out. Let me segue in there to what Zach was saying, to the old days when people actually read the paper. Yeah. It was a big thing because the brand new newspaper called the USA Today. I remember it come out about that. But Sack, could you share that evil prank that I would pull on rookies during spring training?
Oh man,
Big screen.
I took this hook, line, and sinker, Gar, man. So I'm nervous as hell, man. I go in my first camp, I walk in, and man, I see Robin Yount's locker, and I'm not that far removed because when I was a junior at NC State in 1982, they were in the World Series with the Cardinals, and I remember, he was a big motorcycle guy, and so I walk in a clubhouse and like there's Robin Yount. I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if he drives a motorcycle to the ballpark. So the first time we get out, we do stretching. Johnny says, okay, I just got word from the Cactus League that this year, if you win first place, you get a Sony big screen. Second place,
I remember that.
Second place is a boom box, and third place is a gift from Home Depot. And I'm like, shit, I don't want that. And so I remember every day, Phil, spring training, going home and watching the news in Arizona to see how the Giants did. And then I remember one day I walked into the training room and I said, hey, John, I got a question to ask. What happens if it's in a split quad game? Yesterday, the Giants won. They won at home, but they lost in Peoria. So he goes, oh, hell, when you do a split squad, even if you win, you only get half a win. But if you lose, you get deducted a full game. I'm like, so then I'm looking at the Cactus League, and I remember the last week of spring training, I figured, man, we were either going to win it or be in second. I remember because I had a pretty good shot I was going to make the team, and I remember calling my mom going, hey, I don't think I have to buy a TV because if we win these next 2 games, I'm going to get a big screen. And I said, worst case, Mom, I don't even have to buy a radio. I'm at least going to get a boom box. So I only have to buy a TV or a boom box.
That's beautiful.
I was like,
he was still doing that when I was there. Johnny played that gig for a long time.
Johnny, you're such a prick.
It's all love. You know that. It's all love.
And then
that was
my
a good
favorite,
one.
Yeah, favorite Johnny ones too. I remember because with Milwaukee, we were always on a purse string. Like, hey man, we got to save the money where we could save it. And we had a game one night where we got rained out. Like after, hey, Giants, all you guys got your ankles taped. Come back in here. I'm gonna use that tape again tomorrow.
That's true.
Yeah, John, I know. I've known John for a few years. That sounds like John.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right there.
Before you leave the deal about the change in the clubhouse and electronics, I actually walked into the Astro clubhouse a couple of years ago when they had all the great players. They're kind of breaking up now, but they had Bregman, Tucker was there, and
Altuve,
Altuve, and all those guys. And so I walk in the clubhouse, and there's usually a buzz in a clubhouse, but I hadn't been in the big league clubhouse in a couple of years, and it had flipped, and they were all actually like Plesac talked about. They were on their phones or iPads, and they were facing their lockers. But what they were doing, they were playing a game against each other in the clubhouse. Now they talk to each other. They're looking at their iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them might go, that, but he's got his back to everybody else. I'm going, what the hell's going on here? Nobody talks to anybody. They don't interact except through the electronics. It was a weird. It's different. I'm not going to say it's bad or anything like that. It's just a different way of the way these guys are doing things today.
Johnny reprogrammed a lot of guys' thoughts, and I'm guilty of that too. Like, so we had a thing for a day game. Now there's all the nutrition and health bars, and they're making smoothies. We had like 5 boxes of donuts and coffee, and Johnny would say, "Get you a sinker. You got to eat one to hit one." I'll be damned, Jim, if I don't drive by Dunkin' Donuts here in Berkeley Heights, and when I walk by Dunkin' Donuts, I'm like, hell, you got to eat one to hit one.
Where do you come up with all that crap, John? Your brain must be a real. I have it diagnosed after you're dead.
I think you guys know by now I'm a genius, and my brain just works that way. I don't feel I have to apologize for it. Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
I'll tell you what I'd like to do.
you did
Go
know
ahead.
all the most useless trivia questions on the
Yeah.
planet. You always
Yeah.
got the year that the songs came out. They would do
Yeah.
that on the board in Milwaukee. What
Oh.
year was this song popular? You got that 99% of the time.
Well,
It
he
was
had the
remarkable.
answers because he knew it was going to be on there.
Oh, that's what happened. Euchre was feeding him the info
Oh, hell yeah.
before the game. Oh, how
He'd
stupid
go
am
talk to
I?
Bob Betts and say, hey, Bob, what's the trivia tonight? He'd have the answer.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah. Drive home safely.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hey, I want to just switch really quick, and I know Sack and I talked about this when we were golfing a couple of weeks ago, but I always ask guys this. So, Sack, of all the guys you were with in the big leagues, and Phil, whether you were managing them or playing with them, and Sack, same thing. What would be the top three guys you'd have on your, guarding your ass if you were to get in a ballroom fight?
Oh, Chris Baggio's number one for me.
Yeah.
Well, I would agree with you on that one, Dan.
I would say Baggio would be there. Mike Fetters would. That Mike Fetters sneaky. You
Amen,
better have
brother.
some ammunition because he's not going to stop until you kill him.
Both
Baggio and Fetters way at the top of the list. That's for sure.
I agree. I thought Baggio, Fetters, and after several cocktails, probably Rooster. Rob
Deere. Oh my God, yeah. Yeah.
That was Rooster with the cocktails, not me.
Yeah.
Get that straight.
Well, I remember Rooster. Rob Deere was a massive individual, like super strong, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But I don't remember him being
and
you say after a couple of drinks
like
because he was sort of a gentle giant, wasn't he?
No,
No, not really. Okay. Well, I didn't know him. So.
No, great guy. Everyone loved him. And Sack, you can run with this. Phil, when Rooster because it was either penthouse or shit house with Rooster.
Yeah.
Yep.
But when he got hot, he'd carry us.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say so, Sack?
Oh, no question. I remember when my first spring training in '86 was his, and I think we Rule 5'd him from the Giants. So he had to make the club, if I'm not mistaken.
We got him from the Giants. I know that. Yeah.
I thought he was a Rule 5 guy that we had to keep, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, I think we traded him. Here's a name from the past. You ready? Oh, stand up so you can sit down for this one. I'd stand up, but I can't because this is all I got on.
Okay.
But, I think
I'm starting to think he's serious.
Yeah.
I think we traded him to the Giants for Jaime Kokenauer and Randy Reddy.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
I think.
Yeah, you might be right.
Anyway, go on with your story about Rooster, that spring training.
Oh, I mean that guy. Phil, this was like a little bit before you got there. Easter Sunday game of 1987 was the greatest game. I never played on a World Series team, Phil, like you did, but the Easter Sunday game in 1987 was the greatest game I was ever in. I didn't pitch in. We were 11-0. Losing going into the ninth inning, and Rob Deere hit a 2-run home run to tie it. And I remember Johnny and I talked about this 2 weeks ago. It was like a clubhouse of 12-year-old boys. Wow. Dale Swaim hit a walk-off homer. I remember it because I was warming up. If the score was tied, I was pitching the top of the 10th inning, and Swaim hit a homer to walk it off and win it to put us to 12-0. The tie, I think it was incredible. And one thing about Rob too, I remember, John, when he came over, he fit in right away. He was so different than, Robin and Paul were so low key, and Rooster came with this energy every day. And for some reason, he was very kind of I always watched Robin. Robin liked having those guys around, because he would like to look at him and laugh at him, and he thought it was great, but he was never going to – Robin would be in the middle of it laughing, but he wouldn't be in the middle of it instigating. But, boy, he loved the action. And I just remember when Rob came to spring training, like within a couple of weeks, he just fit in. Like everybody accepted him, and he just was like he was just different than the rest of the players. Then that he wasn't afraid to laugh at himself. He was kind of high energy, and I think we needed that at that time, John. I really do.
What?
I do.
He was a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong. He had more of a football mentality.
Absolutely. But yeah, he was great to play with, man. I loved him.
He would be my third guy in that ballroom.
Oh yeah.
Ballroom. How about you, Phil? What would be three guys that come to mind that would have your back?
Well, I had forgotten about Fetters, and I agree with you on that. Fetters could be scary sometimes. And what a great guy he turned out to be. But when we first got him, he would lock up on the mound. I don't know if you remember that or not, Danny.
Yeah.
But a couple of times I went to the mound, and they had warned me. Sal had said, they say that he gets on the mound and he just freezes. Well, I thought, well, nobody in the big leagues does that, so maybe that was something in the past. But the first time it happened, I walked to the mound and I tried to get the ball out of his hand, and he was standing there like a zombie, and he had a death grip on the ball. I couldn't get the ball out of his hand, and he wasn't being obstinate. He just froze. And that's when I realized how strong he was. And then I don't know if you guys remember when his brothers showed up at the ballpark one time. He had, he's from Hawaii, and now Fetters was built like a model. He was like 6'4", wide shoulders, narrow hips, and he was
skinny legs.
He was a fit looking individual. His brothers, however, two of his brothers looked like the true Samoans. They were about 5'11" on height and width. They were huge and super strong. And he brought him in the clubhouse one day and said, "Nah, I'm not. You want these guys on your side when the brawl starts." So Fetters is the right call. But the third guy would have to be Ray Knight, and Ray Knight was a star because he fought in the Golden Glove. And as you know, baseball players, when there's an altercation, most baseball players can't fight. They run on the field looking for somebody to grab them and hold them back. They really don't want to fight. Well, that wasn't true with Ray Knight. He went out to throw punches. And, it happened one time. Houston Astros had a really fireball pitcher, I think his name in a minute, that was a Latin guy, highly strung, liked to throw at guys, and then he would hit them and then yell at them, and all this kind of stuff, and everybody's afraid of him. Well, Ray had enough of that, and he was playing for Cincinnati at the time. And Ray, there's a play at third base, and Ray slides into third base, and the pitcher is backing up third, and the pitcher, pops off to Ray and says something, and Ray hits him 3 times, 2 with a left jab and a right cross, before he's got a chance to even get his hands up. And, I wish I could remember the guy's name. He starts crying. And at that point, everybody realizes that Ray Knight's a pretty tough dude, so don't mess with Ray. So I'd have to take Ray Knight because he had fought in Gold Gloves and he knew how to fight. He knew where to hit you.
That's helpful.
To tell me, hit him right under the chin bone, because that's what knocks you out. So, I never could do that, but so I'd take Ray Knight, but I would take those other 2 guys in any kind of brawl.
Yeah. That was just off the wall. I always ask guys that, and you always get one answer. You're like, really? I never knew.
That guy? Yeah, that guy. Hey, Sack, I've always been enamored with when you get up in the morning, you never want to tell your manager that you don't have it that day, but when do you know you do or don't have it that day?
When you start warming up. I mean, if you've got a physical problem, I mean, there's nothing worse when you're a bullpen guy and, you want to make yourself available every day. And there are days that you're sitting there in the 5th or 6th inning and you play catch early on. And it's just like, whether it's shoulder or elbow, you're just like, man, I could really use a day off. And that phone rings and, it's like, hey, get up, get hot, you get ready. And you're warming up and it's like, whoo, boy, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how I'm going to get through this today. And I think one of the best things that I remember early on in my career, I was so dictated on whether I was going to pitch good or pitch bad by the way I felt when I warmed up. And there were so many times in the middle of my career that I didn't feel good and I had a good game, that I think a lot of it is a mindset to where you don't have the experience of knowing how it is to pitch sore and hurt until you've pitched sore and hurt.
Yeah.
And sometimes later on in my career, I would warm up and I would be like, I'd throw the last warm-up pitch out there and go, I don't know how I'm going to do this today, but I'm going to do it. And you figure it out on the fly. But you can't have that ability to do that your first couple of seasons because you've never done that, because you've been coddled. Like you're on a rotation in the minor leagues. They make sure you don't throw so much so that when you do throw, you're normally feeling pretty good. And if you come to big league camp like I did, and I made the team out of the bullpen in '86, I made the team as the 5th starter, but I pitched pretty good out of the bullpen. They decided to leave me there. Well, if I pitched 2 innings on Monday, at that time, George Bamberger and Herm Starrett were like, hey, put your running shoes on. You're not pitching for 2 days. So I never really got used to like having to pitch 2 out of 3 days or 3 out of 4 till the second or third year. And I think a lot of times people, I credit this to like great managers, and Phil, you were one. It was a tough transition for me in '92, your first year, because and towards the end of the '90 season, my shoulder was bothering me, and it bothered me through '91. And then early on in the year, you said, hey, we got to make a move. We're going to put Doug Henry as the closer and move me to more of a setup middle type guy. But the thing I remember that I liked about the way you went about it is, one, I knew you had played, and I knew there was a respect factor that you can listen at that time, and maybe things have changed now. Like I knew who Phil Garner was. And so when you called me in the office and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. I just don't know if, you're having a tough time back-to-back days. We're going to give Doug Henry a shot. And I remember I didn't give you a confrontation in the clubhouse because I knew deep down inside I was getting tired of like pitching Monday and feeling pretty good, playing catch on Tuesday and going, God, man, this thing's barking again. And it almost took some relief off of me, because I don't think people realize when you're that 9th inning guy, every day you sit around and the game starts and you're joking and laughing, but you're watching this game take place and manager makes a good call. You're down a run, first and second, you put a hit run on it. Guy hits one inside the line, a run scores, you take the lead. And all of a sudden now they're like, okay, you go close this thing out. We got to win and we're going to go home. And it's a tough job, because there's no worse feeling. And there's no worse feeling. And I've said this on the air at MLB, that you have a starter go out there and just grind for 7 2/3. Your setup guy comes in the 8th. You're a travel day on the road, a Sunday in Detroit. You're leaving to fly across the country. I come in the 9th inning, give up the lead. The game goes 14 innings. Instead of being at the airport at 6 o'clock, we're not there till 9. Everybody's pissed and grumpy on the bus. And now you're flying 5 hours from Detroit to LA to play the Angels. And you got the trip off to such a sour note, and you know that you should already landed in Detroit, but because of you were staying there an extra 4 hours at the ballpark, and it wears on you. You're not human if it doesn't. Like the great ones, Raleigh Fingers and Eckersley. Like you talk to those guys, and they always say like, oh, you got to turn the page. You don't just like the only issue I had. I was lucky for 18 years. I never spent a day on the DL, but I never figured out, Phil, in 18 years, how to have a shitty game and go back to the hotel room and go, it's okay. Like I'm standing in front of a mirror, going over my mechanics. I couldn't wait to get to the ballpark the next day to look at the tape and see what I was doing wrong. How could I fix it? Was it the pitch? Was it the execution? Was it, and I tell people this all the time. It's like when you watch a game, there's so many things that go through your mind. And Phil, you might be able to relate to this now. When you're in the dugout, as slow as that game moves when you're watching it on TV. But man, when you're standing on that mound 60 feet, 6 inches away, and you've got first and second and 2 outs or a base open, and you see on deck is Willie Randolph or Dave Winfield, and you're like, you fall behind 2-0. And as a manager, you're seeing things happen. You're like, why doesn't this guy double switch here? And, what are they doing? They've got two lefties back on the bench. But, man, you don't have time to think. It's moving so fast that until you've sat in the manager's seat or you've been on the mound, and sometimes it's going so fast that, you start the inning with a 3-run lead. You already 2 runs are in, and you've got a runner at second and 2 outs, and you see Winfield on the on-deck circle and 2 balls and no strikes. And, what's going through your mind is like, man, I don't want to face that guy on deck. And then you end up throwing an inferior kind of hitter a pitch because you don't want to walk him, and he hits a base hit to tie the game. And you come back afterwards, you sit in the dugout, and you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, and I don't know, Phil, if that happens too when you're managing. Like, when you first start doing it, you're not just worried about the 9 guys. You've got extra guys that you're trying to get at bats. You've got the guys in a bullpen that haven't pitched in 4 days. How do I get that guy into a game? If I bring him into a game, then I got to take him out right away. He hasn't pitched in 4 days. I don't want him to lose his confidence. There's a lot of things that go on that the fan at home has no idea that's going on during a game.
Absolutely.
I agree with you 100% on that. And I have a long time said this, that perhaps the most key position on a club now, you got to have other things too. You got to have an offense that's really strong. You got to have guys that can, hit for power, and you got to have the guys that can execute bunt plays and stuff like that, or it used to anyway. And nowadays it's just all about power. But the most critical position is the closer. And you're absolutely right. The whole world rests on his shoulders. And now, particularly nowadays, because if you can't close a game, with his home runs that are available, if you don't close a game out, I think that's where real, when people talk about team chemistry, I think it's built on the back end of the bullpen. So if a team gets a lead and you go into the 7th inning, and you got a 1 lead, or whatever your lead is, and you lock it down, and you do that the majority of the time, and the guy closes, in my viewpoint, if you have 30 saves, then you can have 3 or 4 losses, and you're in that good range for me. That's what you really need. If you have 7 losses with 30 saves, that's a little bit out of the mark for me. So you got to really be good. But if you do that, the team begins to believe we're going to win. Now the other part of that deal is if a starter starts the game, he comes out in the 4th inning, and you get in your bullpen, and your bullpen shuts the other team down, and they can't add on. That also leads to team confidence. People believe, oh, well, all we got to do is start picking away because our bullpen's going to hold them right here, and we can get back in the ball game. So a lot of this stuff hinges on the back end of that bullpen. And boy, you're absolutely right. When I would make out the lineup, I would look at the other team, and I had about 20 minutes of solitude before I'd go out onto the field, and I was break down their lineup. And based on the lineup, then I wanted to know who I was going to pitch at certain parts of their lineup where I thought was the best matchup. And then I played the game out because you kind of look and say, all right, if we give up 4 hits, then when we get to the 7th inning, we're going to be at the middle part of their lineup. By the time we get to the 9th inning, we're going to be back around to the top of the lineup, and I got to have the right guys ready to face 2, 3, 4, if that's the situation. And I may guess that 50 to 60% of the games went pretty much the way you might have thought they were going to go. You had probably 20% of the games that slipped a little bit and you were a little bit off. And then you had, if I'm honest about it, you had 15 to 20% of the games you had no clue. I mean, it got so, like you're talking about, the game of baseball is really slow until it isn't. And then once it starts to take off, once that spinning wheel starts, it happens fast. And if you're not prepared, if you haven't prepared yourself to figure out situations with the other lineup, it's past you before you know what happens. You don't get the right guy up in the bullpen. It's too late. And you see that with managers sometimes when when you're managing against good managers, they always have the right guy up and you see it, as the other managers, they're going to counter the move you're going to make and you don't get ahead of them. But there are a lot of times with some managers, you realize I got an advantage here because they're not ready for this move that I'm going to make here in the seventh inning or eighth inning. And so it's really interesting that you notice that as a player that it can speed up in a hurry, and when it does, it can get away from you if you're not if you're not prepared for it.
Phil, one of the best. I had a conversation with Leland one time. This is getting back to when you called me in the office and said, "Hey, we're going to make a move, and we're going to go ahead and put Doug Henry as the closer. We're going to move you to the middle part of the game." You were honest, and I remember I was playing for the Pirates and Jim Leland, and after a game one day, he said something to me that was so profound, Phil. He said, let me tell you the best way to do this. He goes, if you're truthful and honest with a player, he'll be mad at you for about 2 weeks. If you lie to him, you've lost him for the rest of the career. And it's so true. Like as a manager, you walk that fine line because you're getting orders from Sal Bando and somebody above, and you can't display all that information, but you've got to figure out, how can I tell this player and be as honest as I can without really feeding him the whole truth? And it puts you in a manager sometimes at a tough spot to where you better have the people above you following the chain of command. Like if you say, "Hey, I'm going to move Dan to the back end. I'm going to move him out of that closer spot." Sal Bando knows, and he's behind it. And then, so you're going to get a call from an agent. You're going to get a call from somebody that says, "Hey, what the hell is going on?" And I think you're right. Like if you can be more truthful with the player, as truthful as you can be, you'll get a hell of a lot more respect in the long run.
No question about it. Listen, you say a lot of times, you have guys on your ball club that may not speak English very well, and the tendency is when you get people that come from different backgrounds than you do is you tend to think, well, maybe they're not as aware as other people, or maybe not as smart as other people, but that's not true. Baseball players. Some of them don't go to college, but they're smart. They're street smart, and they know you're not being truthful with them. And so right off, I remember a conversation I had with Craig Biggio. I had made the decision, and I told Craig this, that and Craig did not like coming out of games, and I told him, I said, now there, and he was playing left field at the time, and he was a decent left fielder, but I had figured out that how many at bats he needed that he was going to get, so that he was going to get 3,000 hits based on his ratio. And I had it all figured out and laid out for the rest of the season. And I told him, I said, "Craig, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you out of the ball game in certain situations. I'm going to put in a defensive player, but I'm not going to cost you an at bat. I've already got it figured out how many at bats you need. So if I take you out in the eighth inning and we've got a 6-run lead, you're not going to lose an at bat. You're just I'm getting you off your feet. You're going to be a little stronger as the season goes on, and that's the way I'm going to play it. And I hope you can it'll be good for you. And I know you won't like it because you want to play every inning of every game, but it's going to be good for you." And he kind of shook his head. So fast forward a couple of days, we get in the seventh inning. He makes the last out, and I do a double switch and take him out of the game. Well, the next day at 2 o'clock, here's Biggio in my office, and he asked me one question. He said, "Did you take me out because you wanted to get me off my feet, or was that a defensive move you made last night?" And boy, the first thing that went through my mind is, "Oh, do I tell him the truth, or do I say no? I wanted to get you off your feet." And so I opted to say, "No, Craig, I thought that was the best defensive move to make." And he said, "Okay." And he walked down the room.
Yeah.
And I never had another issue with him. And Biggio, if I'd have lied to him, he would have known it, and he would have held that against me to this day. I do believe that. So I think you're absolutely right about that. Is You got to make tough moves, but where the manager sits, you got to make the move based on 25 players, not just one player all the time. And sometimes players don't understand that. Most players do. Danny, you did. You understood it. Most players understand. And what's interesting is all the rest of the players know it too. When you make a tough decision, like taking Biggio out in the seventh inning and putting in a defensive player, everybody knows that's probably the best move. And so they also know that Biggio is a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah.
And they know that it damages your pride a little bit when that move's made. But everybody knows it was the right thing to do. And so
Yeah.
tough to do, but you have to do it.
Let me ask one thing, and I know you guys have things to do, but one thing that I've always been amazed by is Moneyball and Billy Bean having the five tools and not making it. My question to all of you is, have you come across players that had it all and just because it's so mental in my mind, like everything's mental. And did you have players that you knew or players you coached or what have you that had that talent but couldn't quite parlay that to a career?
Yeah, right now I'm drawing a blank on
Or what
some of the players, but yes, yeah. You see players that come to the big leagues and you think, wow, this guy's going to be really, really good, and he doesn't turn out to be what you thought he was going to be.
What do you think the root of that is? How can it not happen, I guess?
Well, um, I think the reason it doesn't happen sometimes is because we're fallible. People that look at people and trying to make a decision. I mean, you see good talent, um, and it never they just never get over the hump to where they they play on the everyday grind. The biggest difference in baseball when you come from the minor leagues and you go to the big leagues, you go try the progression from college to the minor leagues to the big leagues, is you're playing every day. And when you get to the big leagues, and when you've got 6 weeks of spring training that you're playing, and you got 6 months that you're playing every day, any flaw that you have,
Yeah.
whether it be you're not in top physical condition, you may have you tend to get tired. So let's face it, guys like Pete Rose had greater stamina than other players did. They could just go 100% all the time. So a lot of players can't do that. They need time off. And I'm thinking about the great hitter I had in Detroit. Um, uh, that was at Texas. I'll think of his name in a minute. But boy, he was a stud, but he couldn't play every day. He just couldn't do it. It wasn't in his DNA to be able to play every day. And the mindset in his case was not necessarily that. He'd break down. He just couldn't do it. He wasn't built to play every day. And you have to. I think some players can learn to do it. Some players have a little bit of trouble doing it. Um, and then we just miss it. Sometimes you overhype a player. Ben McDonald told me when we talked to Ben McDonald, and you guys remember Ben McDonald.
Oh yeah.
He was a good big league pitcher, but he told me that the cross he had to bear when he was in pitching for LSU, the scout for the White Sox, longtime scout for the White Sox, I don't remember who he was, had made the comment in the national press that he was the greatest prospect he'd ever seen.
Mhm.
And that moniker followed him, Ben McDonald, into the big leagues. And he told me, he said, I could never live up to that hype. And I've always regretted, having somebody having said that for me. And it made an impression on me because I used to say, yeah, this guy can be a Hall of Fame player, all the way it's going. So I stopped doing that at that point because you pile this hype on people that's not fair to the player. Let the player develop, let him
Mhm.
happen. So in Ben's case, he was a good big league pitcher, and he probably lived up to his talent level where he was, but he could never live up to the hype. And so I think sometimes that happens with players. We think they're going to be better, and they seek their level, they find their level, and it's maybe not what we think it's going to be, but it is their level, and it's what it is. So I don't have a better answer for you than that, other
Great
than
answer. Yeah.
and I do know that in some cases there's in the old days guys used to drink themselves and party too much. Sometimes they go into Chicago and for 3 days never sleep because they're going to be on Rush Street, or they go into New York and shut all the bars down, and that hurt some of the old time players. But I don't see that in today's game. These guys today generally are much more in tune with keeping their bodies in shape, better nutrition, and being better prepared to play a game on a daily basis. I see that. I see that more and more than the old days.
But what I took from what you said is with the longer seasons, the weaknesses will be exposed, in those long duration of a season as opposed to college and maybe some of the minors, that if you have a weakness, it will definitely be shown sooner or later.
Yeah.
Well, and let's face it, like Donnie or Danny was saying, when you get in the big leagues, you get in that bullpen, and we like to use a guy sometimes 3 out of 5 days, and on occasion 3 out of 4 days, if you've had a short outing in there. And so, you gotta that becomes it doesn't sound like much when you're talking about coming in, pitch 1 inning, and throw 20 pitches. That doesn't sound like a whole lot. You do that today, do it again tomorrow. That's not too much. Third day, you get up and you grind in it. Yeah, it starts to take a toll on you. So it's and you got to be able to. It's not the fact that you can go back out there and pitch. It's also the fact that you got to be productive. You got to shut the other team down. A lot of guys can go out there and pitch 3 days in a row, but they can't get the job done. Now you're going to give up 4 or 5 runs. So that doesn't do you any good. So yeah, you got to do that. And I remember Jeff Cirillo, the first time he was, we had him in Milwaukee. It got around to August, and I started taking him out of games. Didn't put him in the lineup a few times. And Cirillo came to me and says, "Gar, I want to play. I want to play." I said, "Jeff, it's your rookie season. August is going to be a tough month, and so I'm going to give you a day here and there. I'll get you off the field once in a while, and you'll be okay." So now fast forward to year 2. And we get to the end of August, and I played him every day. And he comes to me at the end of August. He said, "Gar, I'm gassed. I need a day off." And I said, "Bullshit. You earn your money now. Now when you got to go play every day, you got to figure out, and your body's got to get grizzled to this everyday schedule, and you got to play hard. And it is hard to do. And it's people don't understand it. You can't explain it. But your mind wanders on you sometimes when you're out there. Guys make mistakes. You see them in August and they forget how many outs they are. Well, that's actually an easy thing to do if you haven't been playing a lot, because your mind just wanders, or you throw to the wrong base because you didn't prepare. You didn't do your thought process because you're tired and your mind was just, off someplace else. So those things start to sneak up on you after a while in a long season.
I got the screen in my name, but can't join.
That's Tom. Tom, is that you?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I got no picture.
How long have you been there is what I want to know.
Watching this whole thing, all this, these geniuses are amazing. Amazing.
You can see it. You've been watching us, and you haven't
watching. I got 3 guys, and up in the right corner, I got my name and blank screen.
Well, some might say you're doing us a favor. Say hello to the guys, for God's sake.
Yeah, well, it's
Hi, Trev.
Three really good guys. Gar.
Hello, Tom. How you doing?
Gar and I were with Oakland a little bit. I was farting around in AA, and he was with AAA club. We used to have some laughs. And then he did a nice job picking up the pieces there in beautiful Milwaukee.
Well, we early on, we talked about that. To no fault of your own, you had some of the worst luck of anybody I'd ever heard of, losing. I thought you lost all 5 starters at one time. The year before I got there, the year that you got fired. Were we accurate on that, or did you just lose 4?
Well, the accuracy is we had 5 starters, but they were 4, 5, 6, and 7. We never had 1, 2, 3. I mean, if we'd have kept Higuera and Nieves, 2 left-handers, separated them a little bit, we could have done a little bit better. We lost both those guys, and then we were, get ready for the Brewers. We got 5 right-handers and load them up. Here we go.
Yeah, Mike Birkbeck, Don August, et al. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a tough time. So, yeah.
How do you? I wanted to ask them when Gar was talking about how he prepared for the games and look at the other lineup and all that, and basically one word, preparation that a manager goes through. It brought to mind, and it's great on this phone call right here because Treb, you were a coach on that All-Star team of '88, and Sac, you were selected on the team in '88. And I remember Tom Kelly was the manager for the American League. And I happened to be picked to be one of the trainers on that thing. So the game's in Cincinnati, I believe. Yeah, in Cincinnati. And Tom Kelly has this pre-game meeting. And I mean, he is into it, how important the game is. And he said, he managed the Twins, and I think Rennick was his coach, and he brought him to the All-Star game. He goes, he's going to be third base coach. He'll be giving you signs. And he goes, we're just going to have a couple signs. Ricky's got the green light. But 0-2, we're taking. And as soon as he said that, Winfield, who I just happen to be, close to, literally Phil comes out of his chair and doesn't like it. And he says something like, I brought a 36, ounce bat and I added an inch to this thing. I'm not taking, and they kind of looks at him. Kelly looks at him and goes, okay, all right, and so he said, shit goes fast in these games. So in the first inning, if Ricky gets on, Paulie, Molitor, you're taking, Ricky's going to go. I mean, he had this All-Star game. I mean, you figure an All-Star game, what's the big thing, And so he had everything worked out and all that. Sidebar to that is, when I got to the ballpark the day of the game, Tuesday, I tell Sac, I said, Sac, you ain't going to believe this. I had a dream last night, man, that you came in the game. He brings you in this fucking game, Sac. And you know what? You got to face fucking Darryl Strawberry. And so Sac just looks at me and he goes, really? Why are you telling me that? And he goes, and then there's a little pause, dramatic pause. And he goes, how'd that dream turn out? I said, you know what? I can't remember. Fast forward, long story short, the game goes, Ricky gets on, lead off the game. And Paulie tells me, because we know how Paulie is, before the game started, Paulie looks at me. We just happen to be standing next to each other. And he goes, can you believe that, Johnny? I'm supposed to take the first pitch so Ricky can steal? And he gives you that look like Paulie does. Like, yeah, right. Let's see if that happens. But Paulie takes the pitch. Ricky goes, and the rest is history. Okay. The game goes on and everyone's getting bored. Before I know it, all of a sudden it's like, what? Strawberry's coming to bat. It's a key time of the game. Boom, out goes Kelly to the mound. I look, in comes Plesac. And
that's the
truth.
The
whole way in, Sac, you want to take it from here?
I remember before the game, Tom Kelly told me, he said, listen, I know I was either near or top of the lead in saves. He said, I'm going to give Eckersley. He goes, Strawberry's your guy. And I'm like, damn, Johnny. I'm like, holy shit. Like, wow. I'm warming up, Phil, in the 8th inning, and Willie McGee's up, and he hits a 2-hop grounder to Donnie Baseball at first base, who never makes an error. As soon as it's hit, I know I'm out of the game because that would have been the 3rd out of the 8th inning. Mattingly boots it. Willie McGee beats it out, and next thing you know, I'm like, hell, Johnny was right. Here it is. Me and Strawberry. that was like, I remember on the mound, and I remember Tom Kelly telling me when he handed the ball to me, he said he's a really good low ball hitter, belt high and above, throw him your good heater, don't mess around. I'm like, okay. Phil, the first pitch was knee high where he liked it. He swung through it. The next one was knee high right where he liked it and swung through it. I'm afraid to look in the dugout because I'm sure Tom Kelly's going, God damn, I told him to elevate the ball, right? And then the 0-2 pitch, I was like, man, my sideline's off. I'm going to aim at his neck like high. And I threw it chest high and he swung through it. 3 pitches, swing, swing, swing. The coolest part about it, this is the day and age. I get back to the hotel where we were staying at the Hyatt downtown. I order room service. I'm creature habit. I got the same thing every night. I would get a club sandwich with crispy bacon, French fries, and a Diet Coke.
Healthy.
I get my
Real healthy.
Oh hell yeah. I get done eating. I get done there, and I'm like, "Ooh!" I get a knock on the door, and it's the guy for room service. He goes, "Here's your dessert." I said, "I didn't offer any dessert. I didn't get a dessert." He goes, "Yeah, well, it's on the house." I opened it up, and it was a piece of cheesecake, and they had scripted on it strawberry dessert. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah,
great. That's
thanks
a good
for your
story.
dream, Johnny, because that game put me on the map, man.
Oh, that's great. That is really good. Oh, what a good story.
Have you had any other dreams, Johnny, that we should know?
Oh,
yeah, but I can't tell him. I can't tell him.
Yeah, not on this forum. He can't.
I have a couple. Not. Well, no, that's a whole other thing. But Trev, do you have any insight of that All-Star game since you were there?
Yeah, and I coached third base half, and then Rennick came in and picked me up.
Yeah.
But I told the guys who were going to run on. I said we got Vince Coleman in the left field, so we're going to run on him. We're going to run on him. So you get to second base. Okay, no outs, 1 out, 2 outs. We're going to score him. So sure enough, with 1 out, I forget who was at second. Anyway, base hit to left field. But oh shit, Vince looks like he can throw. I put on the binders. Unfortunately, that's when Steinbeck hit a sacrifice fly. But I had a game plan. But dang, Vince came in and looked like he could really throw. So I had to stop him. And we're going to run on him. I said, well, I just hunched. He looked pretty good on that one. I had to hold you up. Oh, okay. So it was a fun thing. I think it was a 2-1 game or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
It was uncomfortable as hell, too, because we played the Twins before the break, and we flew on the Twins charter. And I think I saved all 3 of the games, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I remember walking on the bus, and Gary Guy goes, God damn, haven't we seen enough of you for 3 days? Yeah.
Hey, Jim, how much time we got?
I purchased the Zoom membership so we can go for 4 days.
Hey, there's one thing I wanted to ask Gar, and because I've never heard Gar's story. I know Plesac is great, so I want him to repeat it. But Gar, could you share with us, and this is going back to the old times, so it'll make it even better. Can you describe how you first got called up to the big leagues? Was it at the end of a season, or was it out of spring training? Tell the whole story.
Actually, the first time I was playing in Tucson in AAA, and I had this bright idea that since Sal Bando was the third baseman and the captain, I was playing third base. He was Dick Green was the second baseman, and we had Manny Trillo on our team at AAA. He was a great second baseman. We actually traded him to the Cubs, and he went on and played well up there. But so I'm playing third base, and I'm thinking, I got nowhere to go. And I had a timeline in my mind that if I didn't make the big leagues within 3 to 4 years, I was going to shut it down and go into the private world and try to go into business because I didn't want to get too far behind. So I had this brilliant idea with Charles Finley in the Oakland A's that I was going to hold out on my contract. I was going to be the first guy to challenge the reserve clause. So we get about the second month into the season, I have held out. I haven't signed my contract. I, of course, get renewed as they did in those days, and um, as it turns out, I find out that Sal Bando's hurt his leg, and I'm going to get called up. It kind of drifts down. He missed a couple of ball games. Then they decided, all right, we better call somebody up. So Jim Banks was the traveling secretary at the time for the Oakland A's. He calls me and he says, "Well, you're going to have to sign your contract when you get to the big leagues." Well, as my friend who was a lawyer says, I was sufficiently nebulous about agreeing to sign that contract. So I sort of mumbled my word, like that. Well, I get up to the big leagues. It's in Minnesota, Danny, that I go up there when I get called up. I take batting practice. I'm in the starting lineup that night, and what I find out during that time is that Sal Bando only has a bruise on his calf muscle, and we all know Sal had the biggest calf muscles in baseball, so it
Yeah.
was no small thing to have a bruise on that calf. But
Mm.
he was only going to be out for 3 or 4 days. I'm going to play in 2 or 3 games and get sent back to the minor leagues. So I had decided. Jimmy Banks brought me the contract, and I said I'm not signing it. Now we got about 20 minutes before the game. And so Jimmy comes back within a few seconds and said, "Get your uniform off. We're sending you back to Tucson." I said, "Okay, no problem." So I'm taking my uniform off, and Reggie Jackson comes over to me. Now, Reggie didn't know who I was. He didn't even have a clue who I was. He said, "Hey, kid, what are you doing?" I said, "Reggie, I'm not signing my contract. They're sending me back to Tucson." He said, "They're taking you out of the game?" "Yeah, they're sending me back to Tucson right now." Yeah, hold on just a minute. So this was pre-cell phone. We did have pay phones in the locker room. So he gets on the payphone and calls Charles Finley. And so he says, "Come here." He calls me over, motions with his finger, says, "Come over a minute." And you don't forget these kind of things. And so um, I'd actually read a book that in that off season on how to negotiate, and the theme of the book was don't be the first guy to put your number on the table.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, Charles Finley, who owned the Oakland A's, sort of wrote the book on negotiation, so he wasn't going to put his first offer on the table either. Reggie takes the phone. He said, "Mr. Finley," when I get there and this is what I hear, he said, "Why don't you just ask the kid what he wants?" And so Reggie takes the phone away from his ear because Finley fires a few curse words at him. And the last thing I hear is, "Put him on the goddamn phone." And so Reggie hands me the phone, and it's like I said, "Mr. Finley, it's Phil." And it went dead silent for what seemed to me like a couple of minutes. It was probably a couple of seconds. But he finally says, "What the hell do you want?" And I said, "I want $900. I had made $700 the year before in the minor leagues, but I'd led all categories, all offensive categories. So I thought I deserved a $900, $200 raise." And so Finley said, "Well, goddamn, it cost me that much to send you back to Tucson. Sign the contract." So I got $200. I got to play in the big leagues for like 3 days in Minnesota and got sent back to the minor leagues. But Finley got what he wanted. I signed the contract. I didn't get held out. I got $900, which in those days allowed us to pay rent, and we could save $100 a month. So that was my first call up to the big leagues, Johnny.
Wow. Well, it's hard to top that. I don't even think Larry Haney could top that.
No, he was the topper.
The
Well,
topper,
but he
yeah.
probably
And
could.
Trev had the topper with him, didn't he, Trev?
I can tell a Finley story because I started managing the minor leagues. That's where I had Ricky in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm in Walla Walla, Washington. The phone rings. It's Finley's private secretary, Carolyn Coffin. She says, "Mr. Trevor." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Mr. Finley wants to talk to you." I'm going, "Man, I'm in short season. Hey, what's Charlie Finley want to talk to me about?" So I said, "Okay." So I go, "Hello." He goes, "Yeah, hello there. How you doing?" I said, "Well, we're doing good, Mr. Finley." He says, "I know you're doing good." I said, "Yeah." I said, "We're in second place, but we're playing the first place team now, and if we can beat them, we'll be all right." He goes, "Well, who the hell am I talking to?" I said, "Well, Mr. Finley, this is Tom Treblehorn, and I got the Boise team, and we're in Walla Walla." He goes, Walla, Walla, I don't want to talk to you. He says, I want to talk to Renee Latchman in Double A. He's in first place. So why don't you get your ass going there and Walla Walla? And that's the only time I ever talked to him.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, I can see that happening.
Those were the days.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Sac, why don't you tell your story, how it went down in spring training when you made the team, and include Harry Dalton's what he said.
Yeah, it was like,
this is a classic.
Yeah, in those days, if you made it to Friday and you got meal money after a couple of weeks, you knew you were around for another week. And so one Friday turned into another Friday, so there's about a week left in camp. And on Friday, I get the meal money. So I'm thinking, man, they leave next Friday to go to Chicago because the season starts on Monday. So I get the meal money, and, you know, I'm starting to hear like, hey, you've got a shot, kid. And so anyway, I remember on Friday, I go into the office and I'm on the field, and Jimmy Bank calls me off the field, and I run in off the field, and he says, hey, they want to see you upstairs. And I'm like, okay. So I go upstairs and I'm sitting there, and Bud Selig is in there and Harry Dalton are in there. And they said, hey, kid, we, got a tough decision. We can only take 25. And I know that, like, there's 26. And I said, yeah. He goes, well, I just want to let you know, we just made a trade. We traded Moose Haas to the Oakland A's for 2 minor league guys, Steve Kiefer and Charlie O'Brien. I said, okay. He goes, well, did you do math in college? He said, so there's 26 minus 1, that leaves 25. We just traded Moose Haas. Congratulations, you're going north with us. And I remember just wanted to die. Like I didn't have anything, but then I'm thinking, damn, I don't have to go far to get my big screen TV. Johnny could just hand it to me on opening day. I didn't have to worry about him shipping it to me in Vancouver.
Shipping is extra.
Hell, they just handed it to me. Hey, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I got a call at 1:30 with MLB.
Man. Thank you, Sac.
Perfect.
Great to see you, Danny.
Great to see you. Nice talking to you, Trev. Okay.
We appreciate it.
Gotcha. Okay. Bye.
Thanks.
Wow, that's great.
And I have about 10 more minutes too, guys. So
I don't want to make it painful. You guys have been so awesome.
No, it's all right. But I'm leaving the house here at 1 o'clock. So
we'll tie it up then.
No,
I thought that was
I can keep going for a little while longer. Matter of fact,
well, catch up with Trev. Trev's the guy you haven't
talked to. Trev. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just hanging in there, 77 years old. That's no fun. But everything's all right. Yeah.
Where do you live, Trev?
I'm in Snobsdale, Arizona, which we call it Scottsdale here, but I call it Snobsdale. I'm out there. I go out my front door, and I got the Camelback Mountain there, not too far away. So I got a nice spot.
Oh, how nice is that? How nice is that?
Then I got a beach house up in Oregon. I shoot up there. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, for me, I've always felt like the Phoenix area, Scottsdale, and all that was absolutely designed for spring training. I love spring training in Arizona so much better than I did in Florida.
Yeah.
Everything's so much closer, even though it's even grown now. But back in our days, it was, a short bus ride to wherever you're going to play a game. And when the weather was good in Arizona, it was better than it was in Florida for me.
The dry heat and everything.
The dry heat, yeah. And it seemed to me like Florida had more rainy days than we had bad days out in Arizona too. So I always liked Arizona.
I lived in Florida for a while, and I remember at 3:00 in the afternoon, it would rain like clockwork. I mean, honest to God, you could set your watch to it, and 10 minutes later, it would clear up again. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen.
And twice as humid then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. The fog, you'd see the fog-ish coming off the road. But it was the strangest thing. You could almost set your watch to it. It was peculiar, to say the least.
Johnny, how about when we were out on 83rd and Bell Road, and we can get to Tucson faster? then we could get to Sun City.
Yeah.
Really, no kidding.
We'd jump on I-10. We'd be about an hour and 5 minutes. We'd be at the High Corbett Field. Going the other way, we had to go back streets. We had to pass the horse track, which was always backed up. Then we had to go out Bell Road to 83rd, and then coming home afterwards was an hour and a half sometimes to get home.
Just bad traffic, huh?
Crazy. Hey, I've got a question. One last question for Gar and Treb here. And I know you got to really go back in your mind, but could you give me your top three, which you felt as a manager, leaders? What ball players were the top three leaders on that team?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, for me, Dale Swain.
Really?
Dale Swain. Dale Swain made all the plays, got the big hits, quiet. You name what you can do, but for unfortunately, with his broken leg was a problem. But to me, in Vancouver, I had him in Vancouver. Of course, he was a number one pick, and I was batting him ninth, and he was a little put out about that. I said, "Well, I'm telling you something. Get the American League with the DH, you're going to be hitting ninth there too, probably." And that's where he ended up hitting and doing a pretty good job. But he was steady, and worst injury I think I had in my career was when he had the collision with Hamilton.
Yeah, I remember that in Detroit, September 9th, he got whip kicked.
Yeah,
late in the game. It was terrible. It was a Saturday night. Yeah. Besides Dale, anybody else come to mind?
Well, I mean, Serhoff special.
I was going to say Serhoff, yeah.
All on his own, because his mindset was so good, we nicknamed Surlyhoff because he could get a little bit angry from time to time and pout a little bit. But he was a solid player. He could hit, he could run the bases, he could catch, play the outfield. I mean, he was a good
Both those guys you named, Treb, are on my top guys also of just flat out best athletes.
Yeah.
They were outstanding athletes. Yeah.
And then
anybody else come to mind, Treb?
Well, he has some disappointments when you have a guy like Glenn Braggs, who I thought was going to be the next everything. My God. I mean, if you wanted to get a model for a ball player.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like 2% body fat.
I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. So it's kind of funny how, the intangibles and the things that happen, and the guys that do make it, the guys that don't.
Yeah. Trev, you told me once how you were very fond of Sheffield, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I was.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I loved Sheffield because I knew what he was. And I was always mystified that how he made things so difficult for himself and everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be in Milwaukee. It was not the limelight that he wanted, but I remember having a conversation with him because we moved him from short to third. And he was all upset. I said, "You're going to end up in the outfield. You're going to end up in left field, and you're going to end up in left field. You're going to end up hitting third somebody." But I said, you just got to have a little perspective, that, and then they end up trading the next year. But he was a rare talent. I remember against Seattle one time. Well, no, the best story about Chef was Johnny. You remember this? In Texas, we're playing the Rangers in that old ballpark, and Nolan Ryan's pitching. And
wow, yeah.
Sheffield takes a Nolan Ryan heater on the inside and knocks it 500 feet to left field.
You told me that, yeah.
Just foul. Well, okay. The next pitch, right at Sheffield's head. The helmet goes up. He goes down. The ball goes between his head and his helmet. He gets back up, cranks those hands with those gloves, stands in there again, hits one, same spot as the one before foul. Nolan Ryan just nodded, never knocked him down again. That was it. Wow. He won the battle. And Chef was a fascinating player. I mean, you talk about, I mean, he was something else. I thought he was a Hall of Famer. And
I couldn't believe that they didn't vote him in his last time.
Yeah, came close.
Yeah. How about you, Gar? What would be the top 3 leaders that you've ever managed?
Well, BJ, I wouldn't have put BJ in that class, but when you mentioned it, um, BJ, when I took over the club, he became what I mean. We called him super sub, or because we played him at different positions. He could have played every position on the field, but we
Yeah.
played at all different positions, and I learned a valuable lesson at that point because of BJ Surhoff, I always looked for a guy that I could play often in different positions.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I usually found a guy somehow that could fit that role.
Yeah.
And so BJ was a leader in that regard. I always thought Robin Yount was a great leader in the way he played the game. I respected him, but the best leader that I had was Jeff Bagwell. I'd put him in that category, and then after him was Craig Biggio. That I managed. I didn't have anybody in Detroit that was a leader, and that was the reason we had a rotten ball club up there. But I get just one story about Bagwell.
Yeah.
We had a kid, a rookie on the team in Houston when I first was there, and he came in, and we had parking spots underneath the stadium, and they were sort of not marked, but everybody had a way to go. Well, this kid drives his car underneath the stadium and into the tunnel down where the clubhouse is and tells the clubhouse boy, take my car and put it back up there. Well, when Bagwell parked his parking spot and he saw the clubhouse kid coming back up and bringing the car back up to park it in the rightful spot, he of course asked him what was going on, and so Bagwell promptly went into the rookie and said, "Kid, we don't do that around here," to the clubhouse boys, and it never happened again. So those are the kind of things that good leaders do on your ball club. Those little nuances that
Yep.
as a manager, you want to pick your spot when you want to call somebody on the carpet. You wouldn't necessarily do it in that situation, but Bagwell took care of it, and that Bagwell was excellent about that, and was an awesome leader. I didn't know Dale Swain, but I always heard good things about him.
I like
Good.
it.
That's it for me. Yeah.
If you guys ever want to do this again, please just let me know. This is fun for me.
Okay, I got to run. Trev,
Okay.
it's great to know you're doing well.
See you
And
guys.
I hope good health stays with you, and you enjoy yourself. One time I just saw the college baseball classic down here, and Arizona was down here with Chip Hale. You guys probably know Chip Hale. And Tennessee was down here. And Tennessee, of course, I don't know if you guys have been watching college baseball, but one of my remarks, I was watching the kids do infield and all that. And it used to be when you watch college guys take infield, they look like college guys. And when you watch big league guys do it, they had there was you could tell a big
There's
difference.
a drop off.
The big drop off. You can't tell the difference now. And I'm telling you, these guys are unbelievably conditioned and strong. They're big. And of course, aluminum bat makes all the difference in the world, but nonetheless, Arizona's talented, Tennessee's talented. It's going to be really fun to watch them play, from this standpoint. As a matter of fact, I think Tennessee could beat several major league ball clubs right now in a best 3 out of 5 series. I'd pick Tennessee over a couple of the teams right now.
Wow.
And probably Arizona too. They're pretty good. So it's interesting. When Tennessee's got like 3 guys that throw 100, and one of them throw 102 a couple of times. They got a couple other guys that are throwing in the high 90s. I mean, where are they getting all these guys? Unbelievable. Anyway, I got to run.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Take
All
care.
right. Good to see you.
Johnny, we'll talk to you.
All
Okay.
right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Sorry. All right, don't get my
Okay.
picture.
Appreciate it. Johnny, I'll talk to you soon. Treb, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Treb.
Thank you, Johnny. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
man. I'll talk to you. Thanks, John.